Welcome back to your Best Ever Beanie tutorial part 2. So you're now at the stage of finishing. You've completed the necessary rows and it's measuring where you want it. So this is going to be a no-sew seam that we're going to create. Top end here is your crown or top of your beanie where your shaping is, and you can see if we lay it to the side there, it's quite a lot narrower than the fold up edge. Now your first step is to work out how much turn up are you wanting to have on your beanie, and I would recommend it will sit between somewhere like 10 to 14 stitches up from that bottom edge. So place a marker there, we're just going to count those off and check where we want that. Beanies do look better with a nice full turn up. So once you've done that, we're going to place it wrong side together. What we want to do here is draw our loop through to the other side so that we can slip stitch each stitch as we move across. Now your beginning chain side, just secure that with one chain before you go any further, and picking up the front loop, this is the row that you finished on, your front loop, and then across to a stitch and slip stitch. The work on the other side is your very beginning chain that you started with, your very first row. So by doing your front loop here as you slip stitch, you are going to then keep a rib line forming, which will give the appearance that the pattern remains true. You can see that there, you've got that little bit of rib line. So we're just going to continue slip stitching. So we're popping our hook through front loop across to the other side and slip stitching and working our way until we get to the marker. Now you can, if you wish, slip stitch into that stitch, or we're going to turn through the work. Now your work now will be right sides together, which would be expected if you were seaming something. You would start with right sides. Now by having done it the other way, what we've done is that when we do the turn up, the seam will then be on the right side of the beanie, so it doesn't get seen. Now as you work with this one, your slip stitch now will be in the back loop, so your chain beginning work is at the front of you and your very last row is now away from you. So again, by into the back loop slip stitching, we're ensuring that we keep that nice line of rib consistent. We'll just speed that up and we'll head up to the top end, which is the top of our beanie, our crown, into our stitch, across to the back loop, slip stitch it through. Our last stitch there. So you just want to make sure that you are keeping all your stitches even as best as possible. Cut off a really nice long tail because we're going to actually show you two methods of closing that end area. You pull your thread through there and just tie it off ready. And you can see you've got your seam and then no seam, so that'll be your turn up. And as you can see, when you turn it up, beautiful, there's your seam on the inside and no seam. And now we're going to work on closing the crown or the top of the beanie. So by having reduced that area, it will mean we'll have a lot less bulk. Now method one is going to be just gathering up the edge. So your nice big-eyed darning needle, thread it, and you're just going to be catching the very top loop of the rows. Now by doing this, not going down into the lower part of the stitch, we're going to end up with a lot less bulk as well. So it's a little trick if you're seaming something, just grab that very top loop and we will work our way through back and forth, weaving through and gather the work up. Now I've gone on to, as you can see, a different coloured beanie. The first video that I took just didn't give you enough clarity. My hands were covering and I was off camera at one point, so we've just switched over to another beanie that was another test, testing the pattern as we went. So we'll just quickly flick through here. We're going to go all the way around to that seam and just pull that up nice and tight. And to ensure that we don't have any problems with this thread potentially breaking, what we'll do is we will tie it off. We will just wrap that, get that as tight as you can. Come back through, grab a stitch and just tie off to secure. And then what I need you to do is just then continue working back around, catching into the stitches as best you can, and we're just going to give it that double strength and then be able to draw it up again a bit further. So you don't need to be too particular about this. You're just wanting to work your way back around that gathered up area. And then draw it up. So if you are planning on having a beanie without a pom-pom or fom-fom, you don't want a big gaping hole. Now you'll be able to achieve a fairly small hole with this method of gathering up, far smaller than maybe a rectangular style beanie, but there will still be a very small hole. So we're just working back to where our seam was. Then we're just going to draw it as firm as we can again a second time, and pop it across your finger there, make it nice and tight, and back in, grab a stitch or two, and we'll just do a couple of tying off finishes. Oops, having trouble getting my needle through. I'm using a blunt ended darning needle, so not to pierce the yarn, and it can be a bit tricky sometimes getting it through. Right, one there. And I'll just pop my finger through so you can actually see that we have reduced that hole significantly. Alright, so that's what it looks like when it's turned through. Now I'm going to show you how to insert a removable fom-fom, a fur pom-pom, using a cord toggle. Now if you can find these cord toggles in a nice flat profile, then they're far better. You will not feel this when you are wearing the beanie. So it just has a push pin. Just going to push that through, we'll open it up, pop our hook in. Now my fom-fom has got an elasticated end. You may have to attach a cord of some description if you have not got an elasticated edge or you're doing a standard pom-pom that you've made. So what we want to do is pop the hook up through the hole, grab onto our cord or elastication, and we're going to draw it through. So just hanging on to that, carefully draw back through your hook. The whole idea of this is that you can release the fom-fom or pom-pom off at any time you may be wanting to wash it and not have the pom-pom on there. So now you're just going to squeeze it so it opens it up and pull that elastic back through. So when you release the push pin, it actually has springs there. It will actually grab that elastic and hold it in place. So then we're just going to tuck it, a little bit fiddly, but just fold it over the end and take your hook out, and it will then have caught into the push pin area and be secured. So particularly for the guys, they often don't want to have a pom-pom on their beanie, so this is a way that you could take it off at any point in time or just make your beanies without them. Now, second method is a completely different system where you're going to create like pleating. So we're just going to quarter our work. So we just had it folded there with the seam to one side. We found the halfway point. Now we're lining up our stitch marker with our seam, finding our quarter to the left, popping in a stitch marker and finding our quarter to the right. Just pop one in there for the seam as well so we can identify it easily. your seam. And we are, of course, right sides together at this point. Pop that marker in. And we're going to thread our needle and we will begin sewing. So this does require a little bit more sewing, hand sewing. And my tail is quite long, probably far more than I actually need, so I may need to trim some of that off. So just lining up your seam across to the opposite side, we're just going to take our needle through and catch into that very upper layer and go across there a couple of times. Yep, that's far too long, so let's trim that tail, make it a bit more easier to work with. Go back across to the other side and do the same thing. Now you can take that marker out, you don't need that now, you know where the position is for the seam and your first stitch. What we're going to do here is just create a holding stitch, but not too firmly. It's okay if we've got a little bit of a gap, because this will basically be the hole in which we'll be popping our pom-pom or fom-fom through when we do our insertion later. You can see we're just leaving a little bit of a gap there. Okay, so now just pinch that together and bring the marker through to that position, line it up, and just take your needle, grab that stitch where that marker is, take your marker out, and what we're going to do is we're going to pinch those pieces together. We'll just put one more holding stitch in there. Take out your stitch marker and then just sandwich those layers together. Again, not too firm, just leaving a little bit of easing through that center. But as you stitch across these layers, you will be doing a firm stitch. Now we're not going to go over casting, we're just going to go into the stitch. We'll just go the far side first, just move along a little bit and back in again, and just catching that very top layer of all of those 4 layers. Just move slightly across your work and catch each layer. You can see that I'm only catching the very, very top part as we come through. Just work your way right across to the outer edge. And then what we'll do is we will secure. So we are doing it a little, pulling it a little bit firmer here. We don't want these areas to gape or open up. So do pull them a little bit firmer and into our last area there. Now to ensure that it holds, I'm just going to do one securing stitch. So pop your needle through and then draw it back through your loop so it tightens off the yarn. And then you're going to take your needle and work it back to the center point. So just work across the top and just weave back and forth. You don't have to be too particular about this. Main thing is that you're working to get your yarn back into the center point, back at the seam, so you're able to then repeat what you've just done and fold in the other side. Right, so we'll just flip our work over, turn it around, and we'll do the same as we did before. Squeeze in that point into that middle area, line it up, marker to the center seam, pop your needle in so you know where it is you're stitching to, take that marker out, and then you'll be squeezing and sandwiching those sides into that nice pleated effect and repeating your stitching through. So back across to the outside, move along just a little bit, catching the very, very top, and just go weave back and forth through the work. And again, that part can be nice and firm. We want to make sure, as I said, that we don't have that area gaping. And when you get to the outer edge, again, you'll want to secure the stitch so that it just keeps everything in place and there's no movement or opening up of the area. Right, so we'll just do that securing stitch. Great. So the next thing you're going to want to do is actually bring your two outer edges into the middle. Okay. So we'll just have a wee look there. There's a little bit of a hole that we'll be able to work with. This is a really nice top of a beanie for the blokes who don't want to wear a pom-pom or fom-fom, and where you want to have a beanie without a hole that's visible. Right, so we're going to bring our two outer edges together to the center. So using your needle, just go back across to the opposite side and grab that outer edge and draw it together. What we want to do is we want to line it up so it's over the top of the seam. So just go back and forth a couple of times, and we don't want it to be too tight, just to give it a little bit of tension there, holding it in place. And I would secure that there so that again we don't have any shifting. So what we want to do is then line it up with the center. See, the center's down in there. So what we're going to do is just then pull that forward so you can reach it carefully and grab through that center point and secure now your two outer edges that have been joined together down into that center point. Just grab another thread there, back again, and then we'll just secure that off. So again, it doesn't have to be really tight, really firmly done, just a nice holding stitch, and secure it a couple of times, and then you'll have your thread there that you'll just then weave in and finish off, cut, and you're done. And you'll have another tail there, which was your very beginning thread of your chain that you'll need to weave in. So this is how it looks, basically like a pleated look at the center, and there is no real visible hole. So let's now insert a removable pom-pom fom-fom using the same technique with our cord toggle. Pop your hook in, and from the inside we will come through. We'll just find where that little tiny little hole is and pop our hook through, and then we'll grab our, in this case it's our fom-fom with our elastication, and do exactly the technique, same technique as you saw of putting the fom-fom on for the method 1 beanie, the gathered end beanie. So pop your cord or elastic over, pull it through. Now if you're not using an elasticated finish, then your cord would do, you do exactly the same, but once you've pulled it through at this point, you would then release the pin so it grabs it. You'd want a slightly longer tail with a knot, and you'd tie it around that area with a holding knot which can easily be undone, so that if you wish to remove it for washing, you can. That's why I love these elasticated finishes on these pom-poms. They really do make life nice and easy. So there you go. And of course, to fit with your beanie, we now also have the fingerless glove, the unisex glove that is one size fits most. So congratulations on finishing your beanie. If you're watching this and you haven't actually purchased the pattern but are interested in having that so you can make a beanie for yourself, then pop down into the description below and you will see the details that can link you through to the Etsy store or Ribblr.com, the caravan hooker store. So I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial, that you found it helpful to support you in learning how to make your best ever beanie, and that you really enjoy it. So don't forget to also pop through a review in the area where you purchased it. So thanks again for joining, and we'll see you on the next pattern.